The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Rieger getting traded to Minnesota changes nothing.
6'4" guys running 4.4s. These guys don't grow on trees. And a lot of times I'm willing to bet on, especially, long term on the freak athlete.
You don't ever want to overreact to what guys look like in preseason. There's been a ton of preseason all-stars that never make rosters or never pan out. Good morning, Belly Up Fantasy Live. How we all doing this morning? The whistle means it is time to wake up and get going here on today's program. I am, as always, Chase Thornton, coming to you from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar. It's just me and you in the bar this morning. Kevin and Andrew are both busy right now, and it is kind of the NFL's dead zone period. So we're going to touch on some of the. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about the Super Bowl today, but next week, that's the big prize. This week, we're going to try to hit some quick hitters about the news and notes from around the league. I mean, we've got Pro Bowl going on this weekend, such as it is. We've had, Tom Brady's retirement again that we can cover. We've had some head coaching hires. We've still got openings around the league. So we'll touch on kind of all of that right now. I hope you're all doing well out there. I hope that, I hope you're staying warm wherever you are. I know it's been cold around the country. It's certainly been cold around here. But hopefully everybody out there is doing well and is not going too stir crazy here in this inexplicable week, in my opinion, between the conference championships and the NFL's championship in the Super Bowl here. Coming off a couple of fun games, last week, a little bit of a disappointment with the 49er game and the situation there with their quarterbacks. But, as we said with the NFL's Final Four, that they got it right. The right four teams made it. It felt like we had the best four teams that had performed the most consistently all year. I think the same can be said here with the Super Bowl. My heart was kind of going for the Bengals. I would have loved to have seen a Bengals 49ers rematch. I think it would have been fun to be able to see the Bengals possibly have a chance at that redemption as they've lost to the 49ers in two Super Bowls past. It would have been a neat storyline to see Brock Purdy as a rookie quarterback take his team that far and see what he could do against whomever he was facing. But we got the Eagles and the Chiefs. When all's said and done, it was pretty chalky. Number one seed versus number one seed here. And they really were the two top performing teams and the most consistent teams, it felt like, all season long. Now, early line, thanks to our friends over at Quarter Four Sports, early line has the Chiefs as a 1.5 point favorite. And now I know that they've been there very recently, and they've got, Patrick Mahomes, obviously, they've got Travis Kelce. I like Andy Reid as an X factor type because I think he's a very good coach. I think that he is going to have that team prepared. I think he's going to have that team on an even keel coming into this game. So I'm not shocked by the 1.5 point line, by the Chiefs being favorites. I am happy to see that it's not a giant line at this point, because honestly, the Chiefs are a little bit banged up. Chiefs are, if you've been paying attention much, Mecole Hardman really wants to play, but there's no guarantee that he'll be available. There's no guarantee that Kadarius Toney will be available. Obviously, he left the game real early last week with an injury, I know we were all shocked by that. I had high hopes for him in that game because he had performed well the week before. And I do think that of their current receiving options, not named Travis Kelce, I think Kadarius Toney is the most explosive, the most dynamic, the most worrisome for opposing defenses. As it is right now, I mean, they're banged up in their receiving core right now. And between being banged up in the receiving core and the fact that this is a matchup here where we have two top offenses, but we really only have one top NFL caliber defense in the Eagles. To be honest with you, I tend to lean Eagles right now for next week's matchup. Now let's see how the rest of the week plays out. Obviously, we've got an entire week between now and then, and it's possible that they could get healthy on that side of the ball for the Chiefs. It's possible that other things happen, in Philadelphia. Hopefully, there's no injuries or anything like that. But surprises can always happen. For instance, take a look at the Joe Mixon situation this past week, which we can talk about in a minute. But surprises happen, unfortunately. Let's see what plays out this week. But in my opinion, to be dead honest with you, early indications for me, I'm leaning Eagles in this one, even though it's Patrick Mahomes, even though it's Andy Reid. I think that it's set up right now. The Eagles have looked good in the playoffs. Now you can argue about who they've played against. Obviously, last week wasn't a big challenge for them, but they look like they are back into their swing of things, where the last 3 weeks or so of the regular season, they didn't look like they were coming into the playoffs hot. They looked like a team that was kind of just drifting. They look like they've regained that swagger. And like I said, with the Chiefs being banged up and with the Chiefs defense being the one of the four units of the two starting offenses, two starting defenses, the Chiefs defense is the one that you could consider a weak link if you wanted to consider it truly weak. So there's my early thoughts on the Super Bowl. We obviously will talk much more about that next week with the guys and get you ready for the Super Bowl. But the news for the week, the big news for the week, I'm sure the NFL would rather the big news for this week be the Pro Bowl and the lead up to the Super Bowl. But the big news that we had was Tom Brady's not so surprise second retirement. Kind of shocked us all the other day by coming out with an Instagram post sitting on the beach, kind of a serene moment. He didn't have the big bells and whistles fanfare. He didn't call a press conference. He just kind of told us on his own social media, which has been kind of a nice trend. Actually, recently we've seen other athletes do that, where they just come out and they release a simple statement or a simple video on their social media, Instagram or Twitter, what have you. I think it's kind of nice. I think it's kind of a personal thing. I think it's kind of a personal touch. The whole press conference and call and have 800,000 reporters and the cameras clicking in the background, and just feels way too self-important, I guess. And not that these people aren't important, and not that they haven't been worthy of, the news coverage and the hype and that, because obviously they don't reach the level they're at without a certain level of self-confidence to begin with. But I kind of like the quiet they know that people are going to be talking about them. Tom Brady retiring. If Tom Brady had a ticker tape parade down the streets of Tampa Bay and come out with the 76 trombones and the big brass band and everything else, he was still retiring, and he was still going to be talked about just as much as sitting quietly on the beach, letting us know in a short video, and that he was just done, that he was going to be moving on. And we know he's got a future. Obviously, he's been successful in pretty much everything he's ever touched. We know he's got the big deal from Fox. We've known that for a long time, and now it's official. He was going to be talked about. It's Tom freaking Brady. It's the GOAT, right? Whatever you want to say about him, whatever you think of his athleticism versus Elway or Rodgers or his performances versus man, whatever else, you can't deny that he's had the greatest career, at the very least, of any quarterback that's ever played. People were going to talk about him. All right. This isn't the third string long snapper for Tennessee. All right. This is Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback, the greatest player at the greatest position, the most high profile position in all of sports. Right. So I like the idea that he came out with this quiet video and just kind of, hey, it's my time. I'm moving on. Leaves behind a hell of a legacy, obviously, and everybody else has covered this at ad nauseum, so I don't have to go too deep into things. Couple of interesting tidbits there as I crack one open for the morning here. Couple interesting tidbits here. He covered the spread over 58% of the time in his career. It was a pretty safe bet to bet on a Brady team covering the spread, whether they were favorites or whether they were dogs. That's a pretty remarkable number. In fact, it's third all time behind only Joe Montana and Joe Theismann in terms of quarterbacks who covered the spread in their career. And when you're talking about, obviously, Montana, who quite possibly had that title of greatest of all time before the Brady phenomenon hit, that's not too bad. 58% of the time, almost 6 out of 10 times in his career, he was going to cover the spread. That's about as close to a sure thing as you can get in the betting world. And you can't beat those odds. Just going with him, you're going to get your money back more often than not. I liked the idea that in his career, and I had said, this has been true for a long time now, but in his career, he was more likely to make the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl than he was to miss the playoffs. That just does not happen. Okay. That's Usain Bolt type performance. If you want to mix metaphors or cross genres there, the fact that, if Tom Brady was your quarterback, whether it was in New England or in Tampa Bay for these last 3 years, if you had Tom Brady as your quarterback, you were more likely to win the Super Bowl than you were to miss the playoffs. And that's a remarkable accomplishment. It's a testament not just to, and again, now this will bring up some of the debate that's been happening. It's a testament not only to Brady's, obvious skill and performance, but the kind of culture and the kind of dynasty that he and Belichick built over 20 years in New England, and also the way that the Buccaneers set the table for him when he came in. They did everything they needed to do, and it worked out right away. It worked out, boom, right away. They win the Super Bowl with Tom Brady. I mean, you couldn't have written the script, and spare me all the NFL's rigged talk. We're not going to get into that ridiculousness. You can go chase your Jewish space lasers and everything else with that, and your reptilian people with that. The NFL's not rigged, okay? I'm not going to say that there aren't maybe people in it, players, coaches, referees, possibly, or whoever. I'm not going to say that there aren't people in it who might not be, all above board, but the NFL itself is not rigged. They have no reason to, and it's an almost impossibility. How are you going to get that many thousands of people to keep their mouths shut about it? You're not. It doesn't happen. All right. But anyway, you couldn't have written a better script than for him to go to Tampa Bay and win a Super Bowl right away. But they did it because they set the table perfectly. They had the coach in place. They had the team around him. They brought in the pieces and the team around him. Anything he wanted, they gave him. And that has to be, mentioned when you bring up Tom Brady's legacy is, the marriage with Belichick for 20 years in New England. And, of course, now the debate is chicken and egg. Was it Belichick? Was it Brady? Well, without Brady, it's been pretty rough up there, but any team that loses their quarterback goes through a rough period, goes through a transition period generally, right? Even the Packers, my Packers, going from Favre to Rodgers had a hiccup there in the early going. They had to kind of reset things. It happens. And you don't normally go like Green Bay did from one Hall of Fame quarterback to the next. Okay. you don't normally get to follow up Joe Montana with Steve Young. That doesn't happen anywhere. And it hasn't happened yet in New England. Obviously, they're still trying to figure out if they like what they have in Mac Jones. He had seemed like he took a little bit of a step back this year, but that the marriage between Belichick and Brady was perfect, and it set them up to do obviously what they've done there for the past 2 decades, or most of the past 2.5 decades. But it's a testament to how to what those two teams put together. But at the center of it all, at the center of everything they've done, it's an offensive league, it's a passing league, and it all comes back to the fact that they did have Tom Brady. Now, I'm not one of those that thinks he's necessarily the best quarterback or the top quarterback. Like, I'm not sure I'm taking him number 1 in my draft if I'm drafting all-time quarterbacks or whatever. But you can't deny the way that he took care of himself for so long, the way that he led his teams, the way that he brought that success out in himself and in others. I mean, not a lot of people are willing to eat avocado ice cream to keep themselves healthy into their mid 40s. And I'm joking a bit there, but it's not much of a joke. I mean, the man did what he needed to do to keep himself playing at a high level for a long time. A good portion of his fantasy output for his career, and he retires as the all-time leading fantasy scorer, partially based on longevity, but partially because he was just that dang good. A good portion of his fantasy output came after the age of 40, a time when most guys are retired or long since retired. Here's Tom Brady playing the most demanding and the most important position in all of professional sports, and performing at a high enough level that a good portion of his fantasy output came after the age of 40. I think he had something like 6 300+ point fantasy seasons in his career, and 2 of those, a full third of them, came after the age of 40. Pretty remarkable there. Back to some of the other tidbits from his career here. The Cowboy game here a couple weeks ago was the first time in his career he had been a home underdog in the playoffs. Again, high-powered teams. I mean, he was generally not even playing in the wild card round. Normally they started in the divisional round, they won, and they moved on, and generally they were hosted the next week too. But it was the first time in his career as a home underdog in the playoffs. He was only a home underdog 13 times in his career, 23 years in the league as a starting quarterback, and he was only a home underdog 13 times in his career, and he took care of business nine times out of those 13. So, I mean, wow, right? 11 times in his career, he was a playoff underdog, period. There are thousands of guys who have played this game, and hundreds of guys who have played quarterbacks who won't see 11 career playoff games, period, let alone the fact that I just told you how often he was the favorite. He was an 11-time playoff underdog, and he was 7-4 in those games. So, I mean, like I said, it was as close to a sure thing as you can get, pretty much, betting. Just going with Tom Brady. If you followed Tom Brady through his career and bet there, put your money there, you came out ahead. You came out ahead more than you could have anywhere else, right? Obviously, like I said, he's a top fantasy scorer of all time. He's over 750 points career-wise ahead of Drew Brees, which is probably a little over 2 seasons. Well, that makes sense. He's got 3 more years on his career than Drew Brees did. And Drew Brees obviously was prolific in his time, especially once he got to New Orleans with Sean Payton, who we'll talk about later. But yeah, he's 2.5 seasons ahead of second place, and second place is Drew Brees. Your new current to throw this out there, your new current active leader in fantasy points is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is something like 1,400 points behind him. He'll never catch him. He doesn't want to play that long. We don't know if he's even going to play here, come next September. But that's your new, for the moment, active career leader. And behind him then would be Matt Ryan, who, again, we've got questions about. Ryan says that he wants to come back next year. I don't know if you heard any of that. He said that if he was going to retire, he might as well just wait for March 28th, 328 to 328, and then embrace the memes that way. But those are your two new active career leaders in fantasy points. I don't know. I don't know if anybody catches him. I just don't know if anybody plays long enough at that high level to catch him. We'll see. I mean, there's all kinds of talk about, some of the young quarterbacks that are out right now, especially, Mahomes, because Mahomes seems like he can do it so much with his arm and not with his legs. And obviously Tom built his entire career on his arms, except for, a truckload of 1-yard sneaks. For a guy who was not a good running quarterback, and for a guy who was not necessarily the biggest or strongest, this wasn't Josh Allen we're talking about. This wasn't Dante Culpepper type, build we're talking about here with Tom Brady. He was good at the 1-yard sneak. And again, to me, that goes up top. That's one of the things that made him such a good quarterback, such a great player in this league, was his mental abilities. At quarterback, you don't play quarterback. I don't care if you're a practice squad quarterback in the NFL. You don't get that far without having, a good football IQ. But for Brady, the entire understanding, the way he saw the entire lay of the field in front of him, I think contributed mightily to his success in 1-yard rushes. But for a guy who built his career on his arm, people look at now say Patrick Mahomes, who can run, but doesn't make his living at it. Okay, he's not what we've seen, say, from Jalen Hurts lately, and we know that guys who play that style, it's going to be tough for a guy like Jalen Hurts. He's already been banged up in his career. It's going to be tough for a guy like Jalen Hurts to play 20 years in the NFL. It's hard for anybody, period. But when you play that style and you're getting banged on that hard, that often, it's going to be hard for one of the running quarterbacks who can set all of the short-term records over a season and what have you, over a game or what have you. It's going to be hard for those kinds of guys to play that long, to be able to accumulate those kinds of counting stats. And a young guy like Justin Herbert, who is, again, capable of running, but looks like he'll do it mostly with his arm. Again, you have to last 20 some years in the league at that high a level I just told you, he scored more points. Brady scored more points after the age of 40 than the vast majority of guys do in their entire careers. That just doesn't happen. So, congratulations to Tom Brady. Good luck to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers moving forward, figuring out their quarterback situation. Now they're obviously they're going to be looking for a new offensive coordinator down there as they let go of Byron Leftwich. So they've got questions at quarterback. They've got questions at offensive coordinator. It's going to be interesting down there. You might be rebuilding for a while down there in Tampa Bay. Their cap situation is going to come up to bite them here this offseason, I believe. You're not going to have Brady back. You've got questions there. And it's going to be tough. I mean, again, we just talked about look what New England's done the last several years without Brady. But that's a situation now where, as an offensive coordinator candidate coming into interview for that position, what are we doing at quarterback, guys? We don't have a great draft pick. We don't have the ability to go up and get one of those top 4 or 5 guys that are kind of making the rounds on social media and on the punditry, broadcasts and that. We don't have that great draft pick to be able to move up. We don't have a ton of money to be able to go out and get a whole lot of people. Our in-house options are not great. Kyle Trask is there, and is not old, but it's Kyle Trask. Blaine Gabbert was their main backup this week. Blaine Gabbert is roughly my age, I believe, or at least he seems like it. And he may be able to fill in as a 1-year stopgap, possibly, until you can get something else. But you've got real quarterback questions there. And if it's an offensive coordinator coming in a passing league where it's important and where your name and your job are on the line, do you want to be relying on Kyle Trask or Blaine Gabbert? I don't know. It may be rough pickings there for a little while. But speaking of coaching hires, speaking of coaching vacancies, coaching hires, some of the other big news this week, we've got Sean Payton finally settles in with the Denver Broncos. Now, this Bronco head coaching hiring cycle, I don't know how much you've paid attention to it, but apparently, they were trying to get DeMeco Ryans, who ended up going to Houston. Good hire for them, I believe. Not exciting from a fantasy standpoint, but a good hire for them. They thought they had Ryan. Then they thought they had Peyton locked up, and then they were still trying to get DeMeco Ryans, and then he signed with Houston. So then they swooped in and just jumped on and gave Peyton the deal and brought him in. Lot of talk coming around right now that, Sean Payton, everything that he did down in New Orleans has been great. And he did it for the most part, he did it with Drew Brees, who was a similar stature quarterback to Russell Wilson, not the prototypical 6'4", 6'5", tall bomber guy. And with the way that Russell Wilson looked last season, I think a lot of people are going to put that on Nathaniel Hackett. And honestly, I'm probably one of them. I wasn't big on the Nathaniel Hackett hire as a head coach in Denver anyway. He'd been an offensive coordinator and he had a reputation as being an offensive guy, but he was an offensive coordinator coming from the Green Bay Packers. Well, hey, they had a great offense. They had Aaron Rodgers, and Matt LaFleur calls all the shots on offense in Green Bay. So I don't understand why, and it was the same way with when McCarthy was in Green Bay, why Green Bay offensive coordinators keep getting hired as head coaches because of their reputation for having been the offensive coordinator in Green Bay. Just blows me away. That shouldn't necessarily be a giant gold star on a guy's resume, because the offensive coordinator hasn't called the shots in Green Bay in 15 years. So I wasn't a big fan of the Hackett hire as a head coach in Denver anyway. Now, I know he's been a coordinator other places as well. And, and now he's going to get the opportunity in New York there with the Jets. And I don't think that he'll do a terrible job there. I honestly don't. It's a much different animal to be the coordinator or be the head coach. You're talking about being the head of a department versus the CEO of the company. Okay. Nathaniel Hackett obviously knows football and knows offense. He's doing what he's doing and I'm doing what I'm doing. Right. So we can all rip on the job that he did in Denver, and deservedly so. He did not look ready for a head coaching job, and he did not look capable of being that leader of the entire franchise. Right. But I think he'll be fine in New York. But now, but I think you can lay a lot of Russell's performance last season on the chaos that was happening with the team. The fact that the team was not necessarily prepared as a unit. They had a great defense. There's no reason. They only allowed a handful of points every game. All they had to do was get in the end zone once or twice a game on average. And they could have been a playoff contender, a wild card team, like we all kind of thought they would. We looked at that division coming into this year. Remember all the hype in the preseason, the AFC West. Oh, look at the quarterbacks that they've got there. It's a stacked division, and look what they're going to do. This should be the most competitive division, and we could see all the playoff teams come out of the West. And obviously we didn't get that, but a big part of that was the chaos that was happening running the Denver Broncos. They had the defense. Denver Broncos have the defense to win a championship today. I mean, they just do, and that's not hyperbole. Defensively, that team can play with anyone and beat anyone. And with some of the offensive weapons that they have now. Yes, they had injury problems this year. It started with Tim Patrick, and then obviously they lost Javonte Williams, and Judy was banged up this year, and they had problems. They had to wait to get Greg Dulcich on the field. They had problems with injuries, but every team has problems with injuries. Okay. And obviously then Wilson, getting hurt didn't help anything either, getting hurt. And again, conspiracy theories. But yeah, Russell Wilson is still Russell Wilson. He still knows football. I think if they can settle in there and actually bring some stability to the way that team is run and the way that team is prepared preseason and during the week, I think that team can be much better very quickly. They've got offensive weapons. They've got some good receiving weapons. They've got, Patrick should come back healthy at some point, and he will be a big help to them. If you remember correctly, if you look back and check out the Belly Up Fantasy Live and some of my articles from the preseason from this past year, I was big on Tim Patrick coming into this year. In fact, I said that I thought Tim Patrick would outperform Cortland Sutton this season. Now, obviously that take didn't come true, and unfortunately it's because, Tim Patrick, blew his leg to smithereens. But Patrick coming back will give Wilson those two big, receiving threats like he had in Seattle when he had Lockett and Metcalf. He likes to throw to those guys, right? Well, now you get Patrick back healthy. You have a healthy Cortland Sutton, a healthy Tim Patrick. You have a healthy Jerry Jeudy. You've got Judy who can zing around underneath and do the things to open things up for the two deep guys, and the two big guys on the outside taking coverage away from him. And we haven't even talked about yet then Greg Dulcich, and if they bring back Albert O, who seem to fall out of their graces and then kind of maybe get back into them a little bit later in the season. And then when they can get Javonte Williams back in the backfield there, to be a real threat in that backfield, the real threat that they really didn't have from anyone that they tried, other than him. This could be a team that could be much better very quickly, just based on stability. Look at what Jacksonville did this season. Look at the absolute dumpster fire, cluster fire that was Jacksonville last season under Urban Meyer, right? And yes, Trevor Lawrence was a rookie and whatever. Look at what bringing in Doug Peterson, a Super Bowl winning coach who knows how to lead a franchise in the professional football world. Urban Meyer's been a great coach in the college realm, very successful, knows what he's doing there. It's a different animal when you're talking about grown-ass men making millions of dollars, okay? Doug Peterson knows how to run a professional franchise, and the stability that he brought to that franchise, I think, was the biggest factor in the jump that they made year over year from last season to this. They were a legitimate threat this season. And yeah, they went through some growing pains early, and they had a long losing streak, and then they went on a long streak winning, got themselves into the playoffs, and were America's darling. I think the biggest reason for that was the stability of the coaching position. They added a little, they signed Christian Kirk and that, but the stability that he added was the big factor, in my opinion. And you look at Denver, I think you can get the same kind of thing. You have one of the league's top quarterbacks. Yes, he kind of seemed like he went off a little bit of a mental cliff this season, or at least things came out that we all learned about a little bit more about Russell's personality that I don't think we all knew before. But he's still one of the the most capable quarterbacks in the entire league is still Russell Wilson. You've still got him. You've got weapons around him, and you've got a defense that can win a championship right now. That's a team that with a little bit of stability, they should, for all intents and purposes, they should be a playoff contender next season, even in that division, facing the Chargers, facing the Chiefs. They should be a playoff contender next season, I think, based just on the fact that I think Sean Payton should bring a little more stability to them. Now, I'm not. I don't know. I don't know if Sean Payton is the Messiah to come to Denver and lead them to the promised land. But I just think that anything that they can get out of, I mean, again, like with Peterson, a Super Bowl winning head coach who knows how to at least run the organization. Okay. That stability is going to go a long way toward making things better around there. We're going to take a break real quick here. We're going to talk about Manscaped. Listen to Dan Mater's dulcet tones, as Kevin likes to put it. And on the other side of that, we'll talk a little bit about their other coaching hires, and then we'll talk about some of the offensive coordinator openings that have been filled and that are still going on around the league, and what we think about them from a fantasy standpoint on the other side of this.
We have breaking news. Manscaped now sells beard products. That's right. They are once again revolutionizing men's grooming with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shape your signature beard look. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make your drapes match your carpet by going to manscaped.com and using the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY for 20% off and free shipping. It's time to tame your mane. No one likes a weird beard, so say goodbye to all your stubble and trouble with Manscaped Pro Beard Kit. It all starts with the Beard Hedger. This thing is a juggernaut of fixing faces. First off, this cordless trimmer has a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths, all with one guard, so no more messy drawers full of extra add-ons. That's right, face grooming doesn't need to be hard. Get 20 different beard lengths in just one guard. Plus, it's waterproof, so you can shave in the shower to avoid all that hair in the sink. The titanium-coated T-blade is tough on hair but smooth on your face, leading to single-stroke efficiency that brings satisfaction one stroke at a time. So make sure you get 20% off and free shipping when you go to manscaped.com by using the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. Once again, that's 20% off and free shipping when you use the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY at manscaped.com.
All right. Thanks for that one, Dan. Coming on back. Yeah. If you haven't yet, like we said, they've got the new beard products over there at Manscaped, not just the tools, but they've got the creams, the lotions, the various ablutions you need to take care of your beard as well, obviously up top and down below. So head over there at manscaped.com, hit that Belly Up Fantasy promo code, get yourself 20% off and get yourself some of that. You can't go wrong. As I said, I'm kind of waiting for mine to grow in. It takes a while. Laugh it up, everybody. It's just where we're at. All right. Set on the other side, we're going to talk a little bit more about some coaching hires here. Obviously, like I said, Sean Payton going to Denver gives me a lot more optimism for their fantasy prospects next season. Frank Reich was the first hire of the whole kind of coaching carousel here a couple weeks ago already, going to Carolina. And now the biggest reason, if you dig into it and if you've paid attention, seems like the biggest reason Frank Reich got run out of Indianapolis or whatever is disagreement over their quarterback situation. Well, they didn't have a great quarterback situation. Okay, it's a passing league. We've already mentioned it 8,000 times on this program, just today, even with me not even being able to talk to anybody else. The quarterback is such an important position. You can't expect a coach to, make chicken salad out of, anything else without having a quarterback. It does not happen in today's world. It does not happen in the NFL of today. You have to have that quarterback position. And they have not had that quarterback position nailed down for quite some time. They've thrown a couple of stopgaps, a couple of ancient, decaying stopgaps, and no offense to Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan, but that's what they've done with their quarterback situation in the last several years. Okay. This season they threw Sam Ehlinger at the problem for a while when they didn't think Ryan was the solution, and then they tried Nick Foles, and then that didn't work, and then they don't know what they're doing there at quarterback. They need to figure that out for anybody to have success there. They are still looking in Indianapolis, but now Frank Reich goes from there to Carolina. And speaking of franchises with no quarterback clue, here's a team that brought in Baker Mayfield, and thought that they were going to hand the keys to him. And he had obviously his injury problems in that last season, but then they end up trading him. He went to Los Angeles and kind of gave them the big middle finger in Carolina, said, "Hey, look what I can do here." Baker Mayfield did not play bad in Los Angeles. Now he wasn't Tom Brady, obviously, wasn't Drew Brees, and wasn't Joe Montana or anything else. He wasn't even Ryan Tannehill necessarily, but he didn't play poorly. He showed he's an NFL quarterback, I think, in Los Angeles, and I think that they have to look long and hard about what they want to do coming into next season in terms of either keeping him around, depending on what happens with Matthew Stafford's situation. But so they get rid of Baker. They had already brought in the year before Sam Darnold and had that go up and down and sideways and every which way, but towards winning. PJ Walker. I mean, they tried everything there, and they do not know what they're doing at quarterback. They do not have a settled position right now there either. But I mean, that being said, Frank Reich looks like the kind of guy. He seems like he's been the kind of coach that can get the most out of guys around him, out of the guys that he has to work with. And he seems like a guy that if you could get him a capable middle of the road guy at quarterback, get Frank Reich a Ryan Tannehill type. And I don't mean Ryan Tannehill necessarily 2022, 2023 Ryan Tannehill, but I'm saying that guy who's never going to be the Brady, the Rodgers. He's never going to light the league on fire like Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts and that. But that guy that just knows how to play the position and can steer the course. Okay. Get him somebody like that, at least. Let him, again, stabilize the situation and stabilize the franchise. I think he can take that team places. That division is wide open right now between the unsettled quarterback situation in Atlanta. We already talked about Tampa Bay. New Orleans doesn't know what they're doing at quarterback, really. I mean, there's not a single team in that NFC South right now that has a concrete long-term, 5-year plan, 5-year vision, whatever you want to call it, for the quarterback position, for the most important position in the whole flipping pro sports universe. There's not a single team in that division. So that division is open for the taking. And you put Frank Reich in there, let him stabilize things and give him just a competent, capable quarterback. I think they can make some noise there. DJ Moore is a weapon. Now, obviously, they traded off CMC. They got rid of CMC. The top fantasy weapon in the entire world has been, when healthy, has been for at least half a decade now. But between DJ Moore and Terrace Marshall, I mean, they've got some guys that can catch the football. That's a team that could make some noise in that division. And if you can get a competent quarterback in there, I like the idea of, DJ Moore being a fantasy threat. Marshall himself, showed that he could be a fantasy threat. If he can get involved in the game plan. Now, I think that they need to figure out, and obviously, I mean, they drafted Corral, and he got injured, so they didn't even have a chance to see what he's capable of. So they do have young options in house. Sam Darnold isn't old. Sam Darnold's not old by anybody's stretch of the imagination. It's just, I think we know what we have by now with him. Okay. But they do have Matt Corral, if Matt Corral can get healthy, so where they could take a year, see what they have with him, and then decide, I guess. But you're punting on a year that's a winnable year. It's a winnable year because it's a winnable division, because no one in that division knows what the hell they're doing behind center. So, bringing in Frank Reich, I think that's a decent move. Now, their fantasy prospects next season, more will be draftable. I think they need to figure out a better running back solution than what they had this season. I'm not convinced that they have the guy there right now in the backfield. At any position in the backfield right now. So I think I think that they have questions at running back. They have questions obviously at quarterback. I would like to see them find a more dynamic tight end, but again, are their in-house options good if they have a decent quarterback thrown to them? Who the hell knows? Frank Reich is a guy who obviously comes from Indianapolis, and they like to use tight ends. They'll use the tight end. It's just the problem in Indianapolis is that they used about 13 guys at tight end, and you never had that one guy you could settle on. So there are questions fantasy wise in Carolina, regardless of the fact that they brought in Frank Reich, and I think he'll do a good job there. They need a quarterback there, but I like that hire for Carolina. Weirdly enough, I didn't think I would be saying that. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that I didn't jump up and down when I heard Frank Reich was going to Carolina, but I do like that hire for them. I think he can stabilize that franchise, and I think they can go places. D'Amico Ryans, I mentioned going to Houston. It's a nice story. He's been a big, a big name this offseason on the coaching hiring carousel. Going back home where he played for 6 years, I think. He played down there in Houston. Good coach. Obviously, he's a defensive mind. Okay, and that's another situation. Tell me if you've caught on to the theme here. That's another team that has questions at the quarterback position, doesn't know what the hell they're going to do. Davis Mills regressed this season. Did not look like the Davis Mills that we had towards the end of last season that we thought we were going to get this season. They don't know yet what's happening with all of their weapons. They seem like they found a guy in the backfield. They seem like they have the running back right now. If he can get healthy, they have some fun weapons at receiver. If they keep Brandon Cooks around, if Nico Collins is healthy, and they've got some options there. Tight end wise, I was hyped on Brevin Jordan coming into the season. I thought he'd do better than he did. Again, I think some of those struggles can relate back to the struggles at quarterback, but they've got other young guys. Tegan Catoriano, the guy that they drafted as well. There's another guy they drafted this year. They've got young options there. They've got room to grow there. But D'Amico Ryans doesn't do anything to excite me from a fantasy standpoint. I won't be excited about anybody down there fantasy wise. Other outside of Damian Pierce, I won't be excited about anybody in fantasy down there until and unless they get that quarterback situation figured out. Colts are still looking for a head coach. Colts are obviously still trying to figure out what they want to do at quarterback as well. I said before, Matt Ryan says that he probably wants to come back, wants to play football again. Was not great this season for them, but neither was Sam Ehlinger, neither was Nick Foles in his limited couple of snaps, I guess. So again, team that's facing quarterback issues, and if you're a head coach coming in, you don't want to have to fight with Jim Irsay, because that's who you're fighting with. You're not fighting Chris Ballard. You're not fighting their general manager. You're fighting Jim Irsay for control of that situation. As a head coach, you're going to have to work with Ballard to get the players in there that you want, but you're really under Jim Irsay's thumb. Okay. And Jim Irsay has had successful teams down there somehow, some way, for better or worse. But he's a character. He is a strong personality in the mold of Jerry Jones down in Dallas and in a different way, Daniel Snyder in Washington, but he's a strong personality, and that is who you are contending with as a head coach there. So if the previous guy, Frank Reich, who we said seems to be a capable, competent coach on just about every level, if he had problems trying to figure out the quarterback situation with that owner, and if this owner is the kind that is going to, on a whim, call up an ex-player broadcaster and be like, "You think you want to coach for me?" In the middle of a season, is that the most stable position to go to as a head coach? Head coaching is a volatile. Head coaching in professional sports, and college level too, head coaching period, is a volatile profession. All right. You don't have a ton of safety anywhere you go. You're only as good as what you've done this season. Okay. Do you really want to go to a situation where you've got an owner who will make those kinds of snap, drop of a hat decisions? I don't know about that. You don't have a good quarterback right now. You don't have a concrete answer at quarterback, and you've got an owner who's a complete wild card in every situation that you're going to talk about. Okay. I don't know that that's a great situation. Jonathan Taylor injured a lot this season. Again, the offensive struggles that team had, their offensive line did not play well for a line that had been a strength of that team. They did not play well this season. Again, yes, you can look at injuries and chaos in the management and at the quarterback position, but it's a team with a lot of questions. I'm not excited about any of the Colts next season from a fantasy standpoint. Outside of, I really think that Jelani Woods could take a step forward again with some competent quarterback play. And if they could settle on him being that guy, Mo Alley Cox is 6'7". So is Jelani Woods. I've loved Mo Alley. I've thought that they should be throwing the ball more to Mo Alley Cox in the red zone for 4 years now. But Jelani Woods seems like he has the explosive ability. He can be a bit of a game changer at tight end, I think, if they could land on him. They keep throwing to Kylan Granson. They keep mixing Mo Alley Cox into the works, and that's fine. It's fine. It's a good problem. At first world problems, right? They've got a plethora of weapons at one position. But between that and their receiver core, I mean, they've got weapons, and if Taylor can be healthy, they've got a weapon there. They've got an offensive line that we've seen play good and probably can and should play well in the future. Get a quarterback on that team. But until they get a quarterback on that team, I would not want to go there as a head coach necessarily. And I'm not excited about any of their fantasy prospects right now going forward. Cardinals are still looking. The rumor is that they may have failed to bring in Sean Payton because, again, the ownership group down there disagreed with him on making upgrades to the facilities and some running of the team type things, which is really a shame if that's the case. Now, again, they have quarterback questions as well. Maybe not necessarily the long-term questions that some of these other teams have, but Kyler Murray, every day that goes by, we fail to get a little more clarity on his injury situation. And we're not sure if he's going to play this year, how much or how well he might be able to play this year. Until he gets that injury sorted out, that's a team that has, at least short-term quarterback issues as well. So again, fantasy standpoint, they've got a ton of weapons down there receiver wise. If they hang on to all of them, if they keep DeAndre Hopkins around, and if they keep Hollywood Brown around, and even Greg Dortch became a weapon this year, weirdly enough. But they've got options down there. We'll see. We'll see what Keontae Ingram maybe can do as a running back. I don't know if I don't know if they keep James Conner around. It's the running back is a replaceable position. And when you're an older guy that's had plenty of injury issues in your career, James Conner's a good player still when he's healthy, but when and if are the big questions there. That's a situation there too, where I really, obviously DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown are draftable pieces. I like Trey McBride and Zach Ertz at tight end. I like Ertz probably more until he leaves. He's getting up there a little bit. He's been around a while, and obviously he's coming off an injury-riddled season himself. I like McBride. I think what they saw to McBride, I think he looks like he can be. Keep in mind he was the top tight end. On a lot of boards he was the top tight end option last year in the draft. So he's highly regarded, and I think he played well this season. But when you're stuck behind Zach Ertz, one of the best tight ends in the game, you're not going to get a ton of opportunity until late. I like Ertz as a fantasy option next year, even if they have to go with Colt McCoy or some other direction with quarterback, even for a 1-year stopgap. Because I think that they will. I think they'll have to use him. I think they'll have to use that weapon at tight end. Remember, Cliff Kingsbury wasn't necessarily known for being a giant tight end guru. Okay, he wanted to spread. He wanted to put guys out wide and sling it and fling it down the field. Whoever they get in there has weapons and options on offense. We may have to wait a year or so to see how it all comes together, depending on the Kyler Murray situation. I still think, obviously, Hopkins is draftable. He's still D-Hop. He's still Nook. He's still F it. He's down there somewhere, and you can still throw it to him. When he was healthy this season, I think he still showed that. But for the Colts and the Cardinals both, I am really not jumping on any of those guys, and I am downgrading guys on every position on that roster until and unless they get that quarterback situation figured out, regardless of who they bring in for a coaching hire. Offensive guru isn't going to be able to do a whole hell of a lot unless he's got somebody to throw the ball. Okay. So, that's my take on the head coaching hires. Obviously, we've got some offensive coordinator hires that happened this past week or two here. Obviously, we talked about Nathaniel Hackett to the Jets. If he doesn't have to concentrate on trying to run the whole team, if he can just look into the offense, he's got Garrett Wilson, he's got Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, he's got about 800 tight ends there as well, between Conklin and Uzama. And remember, they drafted Jeremy Rucker. Breece Hall looks like the real deal if he can get healthy before the season starts, or even whenever he can get healthy. Breece Hall looks like the real deal. Plus, they've still got Carter there. Plus, they've got James Robinson, whether they end up bringing him back or not. I mean, they've got a deep cache of weapons there. They've been working on trying to build that offensive line. It didn't quite all come together this season, but I think organizationally, they look like they have a philosophy of paying attention to the line and wanting to build from the line. And I like that direction. I think they've got a decent defense. Again, what's going to happen with Zach Wilson? What's going to happen with Mike White? What's going to happen? Who the hell knows? We don't know yet. They have been reluctant to kind of throw in the towel with Wilson. Understandably so. They drafted him so highly. It's the most important position. You've got to get that right. So, I mean, do I think Hackett will light the world on fire there? Again, depends on what happens with that quarterback situation. I don't hate the hire like some other people did, because Nathaniel Hackett has been offensive coordinator before, and not just in Green Bay. And if he's not trying to run that entire organization, and with the weapons that they do have there, he's got stuff to work with there. So I don't hate that hire there. Again, you're waiting on quarterback answers. Mike LaFleur to the Rams. Speaking of the Jets, Mike LaFleur changes coasts, and he will now be calling offense for the Rams. Now, if Stafford comes back and if Stafford can be healthy and can be anything like Matthew Stafford, there's some possibilities there as well. They need to fix their offensive line in a bad way. Losing Andrew Whitworth and trying to move on this season, and then having some of the problems that they had on the offensive line, it didn't allow that offense to get going, even when they had, even if Stafford had been healthy. They couldn't do anything because they didn't have a line to block for him. It's hard to play, it's hard to play 6 on 11. You've got to have 5 guys up front that are actually blocking for you. But I don't know. I don't know if Mike LaFleur deserved to be let go, run out of New York. Give the guy a quarterback. Now, there are some who might argue that the reason that they've lacked that quarterback development stems from Mike LaFleur. Okay, well, I guess we'll have to see how that plays out. But I tend to think that coaching can do a lot in the NFL. in terms of, in terms of the scheme, in terms of bringing that stability. And I've brought that up several times, but if you do not have that answer at quarterback, it's more detrimental than in any other professional sport. Even hockey goalies, you can even cover up that weakness to some extent by your play elsewhere on the ice. Okay. If you don't have great starting pitching in baseball, it is a lot harder to win, but you can kind of muddle your way through it. Okay. And plus you're talking about 5 guys in a starting rotation. If you do not have a quarterback, you're out. You're just out. So I don't necessarily lay the blame on New York's failures or lacks of success or whatever on Mike LaFleur. I think he'll be fine in LA. I think if Stafford comes back healthy, I don't see any reason to skip on anybody there. Cam Akers surprised myself first in line, but surprised a lot of people with how well he actually did play. Despite that lack of an offensive line, I mean, he basically he ran Darrell Henderson out of town. He played, he was that effective. At least they thought he was that effective that they ran Darrell Henderson out of town. He didn't necessarily show a ton of ill effects from the coming off of the Achilles injury. So I'm cautiously optimistic about him next year. I won't have him ranked. He won't shoot to the top of my rankings, but I'm optimistic about him next year. I think he'll be just fine. Once Cooper Kupp is healthy, he'll be Cooper Kupp. Now, will he be absolute record trendsetter Cooper Kupp we've seen last 2 years or so? Again, depends on what kind of quarterback play he's getting. Kellen Moore to the Chargers is one that I like. I don't think Kellen Moore was the problem in Dallas. I don't think Mike McCarthy's the problem in Dallas. I don't think Dak Prescott is the problem in Dallas. I think to a large extent, the problem in Dallas is Jerry Jones and Jerry World, everything that he's created down there. I just don't think it's an environment that promotes success. I think it's an environment that stresses success and then fails to set up the people underneath him to achieve that success. It's a stressful deal to be in professional sports. It's a stressful deal to be a coach, to be a quarterback, to be a player, to be a general manager. It's a stressful situation to be at that level. Whether you're in Atlanta, whether you're in New York, whether you're in Green Bay, Wisconsin, whether you're in Kansas City, Missouri, doesn't matter. Does not matter. It's a stressful situation to be at that level. You don't need an owner, a Caligula of an owner like Jerry Jones shooting the entire thing down and constantly throwing his nose in where it's not needed. Jerry Jones, I have no doubt, is a businessman and is successful, has been. He's got more money than I do, obviously. I don't think Jerry Jones, for as long as he's been involved in it, and for as much as he wants to maybe style himself as such, I don't think Jerry Jones is a football guy. He's not a football mind. He's a football guy. He loves it. I have no doubt that he loves it. He's passionate about it. He likes being involved in it. But the problem is you're too involved, Jerry, and you don't necessarily know what you're doing there. Market that. You've got one of the most recognizable brands on the planet, literally. Stick to that. Make your money. Market the hell out of that thing. But hire football people and let the football people do the football things. Get the hell out of there. Get your nose out of where it doesn't belong. Let some of these people operate. I don't think that Jerry Jones has created a situation down there where people can be successful on a sustained basis. He has been the one that's been in their way since the Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switzer days. So I don't think Kellen Moore was the problem with that offense down there. And obviously I don't watch as much Cowboys football as other people. You may disagree with that, but they've been offensively successful under Kellen Moore. They have been a high-powered offense regardless of offensive line changes, regardless of whatever, when Prescott's been healthy and with more calling the shots, they have been a successful and high-powered offense there. Now you're going to put Kellen Moore in Los Angeles. You're going to put him over there with a young Justin Herbert, with Austin Eckler, and with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Josh Palmer and DeAndre Carter and Gerald Everett and Trey McKitty and Donald Parham Jr. and everything they've got going on for them offensively. You're going to put him there now? I like that recipe. I like that recipe for success. I think that they will be just fine over there. I am loving the Chargers in fantasy. I liked them this year. I maybe like them even better next year with more. If they can get that, if he can get that, his system installed, if they can, keep their weapons around, keep some guys healthy, I like I like Moore's chances there. So fantasy wise, I like that hire there. Still have openings in Arizona. We talked about that. We don't know what they're going to do with a quarterback. So that scares me. The Ravens still have an opening. Colts are still having their opening. We talked about the Colts. Buccaneers have an opening. We talked about them. Tennessee has an opening. That's an interesting one because they're looking at a quarterback transition sooner rather than later. Is Malik Willis going to be the answer behind Ryan Tannehill there? I think that, they looked like they were trying to cover up for Malik Willis this season when he played. Now, obviously, again, anytime you got to put your backup in, that's real tough sledding. Okay. But they looked every time they had to play Malik Willis this season, they looked like they were doing their best not to have to even, they didn't want the ball in his hands long enough to get it from the center to Derrick Henry. They didn't look like they wanted the ball in his hands at all. I'm not sure they have the answer there, but he is young enough. Who knows? You bring in a guy, you bring in a coordinator that will work with his skill set, that can maybe tailor some things around what Malik Willis does. Maybe they can be successful. I don't know. Until they get that quarterback situation figured out, then as long as if Tannehill is still there, I still like Treylon Burks as a wide receiver 3 with 2 upside. Physically, he's talented and gifted, but he had a rough go of it this year. I'm not necessarily sure if Treylon Burks is going to be the star in this league that we thought he was going to be. Robert Woods is a solid player, but again, had a down year. The one guy on that team that I do like going forward is their tight end, Chigo Okonkwo. I think he's the most athletic option at tight end. I think he, and they've got, Austin Hooper is a solid tight end. They've got a nice pairing there. And with Jeff Swaim behind him, a good veteran presence like that. If they can keep that core together, if they can keep that tight end room together, they've got some potential there. But I think you need to put Okonkwo on the field. I think you need to use him. He's the guy. And in their receiving options, honestly, he might be their top bet. Kyle Phillips looked pretty good this year. When he played, Nick Westbrook-Akina is young and capable. Again, they're not sitting too bad. Now, Derrick Henry isn't going to be able to be King Henry forever. He's getting older. He runs a rough style. Injuries have happened and are going to happen. But that offensive line is absolutely terrible if they could put a line in front of Derrick Henry. But yeah, again, there's an opening there too, where I'm not sure until and unless they get that quarterback situation figured out, if anybody is going to bring them to new heights. Commanders are looking for an offensive coordinator. Commanders, again, another team with all kinds of quarterback questions. Carson Wentz is not anybody's answer at quarterback. Now they've got Sam Howell, and do they want to go with Sam Howell? And we'll see. But they are a team with some young, fun weapons as well. They've got, McLaurin, we know that Terry McLaurin is good. Even Cam Sims looks pretty good this year. Jahan Dotson looks like a playmaker, and will be fun to watch going forward. Brian Robinson It's a fun running style. Looks like he can be a fun weapon in this league for a while. There are some of these openings are intriguing from the standpoint of the weapons they have, if they can get things figured out at the quarterback situation. But we're gonna have to wait and see who lands where. All right. Like I said, Pro Bowl today. Will I be tuning in? I don't know if I will or not. To be dead honest with you, I've always found the Pro Bowl to be the least interesting. I'm the biggest football fan of the four major sports. Football is by far my favorite. It's by far the one I know the most about. I will watch any football game, anytime, anywhere. Pro Bowl of the four major sports is the worst. Has been the worst all-star game of all of them. Baseball, we've had memorable moments in the baseball all-star game. We've had Pete Rose running over Ray Fosse. We've had John Kruk turning his helmet around and wanting nothing to do with Randy Johnson throwing over his head, right? We've had moments like that. And even if you don't have those moments necessarily from the game, the skills competitions that they have in baseball and in basketball have always been the draw there anyway. The 3-point contest, the dunk contest, the home run derby, those have always been the bigger draw, the better draw on All-Star weekend for those two sports. And hockey has they've tried some different things with their All-Star game. They've done the US versus the world or whatever. They've done now the divisions playing against each other in like a mini tournament kind of thing. They have skills competitions as well that they can run out there. I like what they all try to do with it. The NFL Pro Bowl for a long time has just seemed like it's not really football. I mean, it is, but it's not. You got the linemen all playing patty cake, and it just seems like everybody who's there is putting in their time. More and more guys don't want to go. It's right before you wedge it into this dead week between the conference championships and the game that everybody wants to watch, the Super Bowl. So it kind of feels like this filler that doesn't really have a good place there. I don't know. I think they put it back after the Super Bowl, played at the end of the year, make it something guys want to go to again. I like the idea of changing up the weekend because you're not going to be able to play a real all-out football game. Pitchers in the All-Star game in baseball are still going to throw 100 miles an hour. Power hitters are still going to hit home runs. Guys are still going to try and make diving catches. Guys are still going to try and steal bases. Baseball still happens in the baseball All-Star game. Even in basketball in the NBA. Yeah, they don't play any defense. But those guys still want to win. They still want to beat each other. They're still going to go out there and try and show off their skills and score some points. And we do see points scored there. The football Pro Bowl just never feels like a real football game, and it's not going to be a football game, so make your changes. I might tune in just to see if the new format does anything for it. I know that the dodgeball was a big hit this past weekend. Saquon Barkley getting hit in the face. I think that's made the rounds on everybody's highlight shows. The quarterback competitions, Derek Carr was slinging it. So was Tyler Huntley. Congratulations, Tyler Huntley. You didn't look like you belonged there, but once you got there, you put on a good show. Good for you. But yeah, I'm not interested at all in the Pro Bowl today. I am waiting for next week. And speaking of next week, we will be back next week to talk about the Super Bowl for you. Be me and Kevin here in the bar. Hopefully we can have Duck around as well, Mr. Mallard. But until then, I hope that everybody has a great week. Stay warm, like I said, and get your bets and get your lineups in there. My rankings will be coming out later this week, and my game preview for the Super Bowl will both be coming out later this week. Get over to bellyupfantasysports.com. Check out everybody's content over there. We've got baseball content coming out our ears right now as we get ramped up for draft season there for fantasy baseball. But we're not quite done with football yet as well. So get on over there and check that out. And until then, stay warm. Slanjava.